Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's special presentation on why the finance back office should care about advanced tech. My name is Angela Tice. I'm the National Membership Chair for the CFO Leadership Council, and I will be facilitating today's session. So I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping actually before we get started. So you might have noticed that your lines are muted, and that's really just so that there are no distractions. We certainly encourage your questions and your comments for today's discussion. So please feel free to type your question in the questions area, and I'll make sure to ask those questions on your behalf. I'll be monitoring that area so that we can certainly address those, and we will wait for the end of the presentation to do that. We have a lot to cover in the little bit of time that we're going to spend together. If you're a member of the CFO Leadership Council, you will receive one CPE for today's webcast. Now, to receive that credit, you must be a current member, and you need to answer the 4 polling questions that are asked today. We will interrupt the discussion to bring those to you and give you a chance to answer. In order to answer the polling questions effectively, you must be logged into today's session. If you've dialed in and you want to receive CPE, you need to hang up and use the direct link provided to you at registration. So in other words, you need to be on your computer to answer those polling questions effectively. For about a year now, or actually over a year, the CFOLC has pivoted to help support our community by keeping you as connected as possible. So we're really hoping that you're taking advantage of all the virtual programs across the chapters and the national programs like today's discussion so that you are connected with us. And there is a full list of programs that can be found on our website, and CPEs are offered for current CFOLC members. Just to mention the next webcast that's on your screen right now, October 13th, stimulus funds for businesses. Collect up to $33,000 per employee. Sounds really interesting, wondering how you can gain that money. So definitely tune in on October 13th and you'll find out how. Guests, if you're wondering how to become a member of the CFO Leadership Council, you can certainly connect with me after the webcast. We do have different opportunities of engagement, and membership does start the day you join. So if you wanted CPE today and you ended up joining the community today, you would actually get CPE. So just another plus for being a member of the CFO Leadership Council. Finally, I just want to mention that most of our webcasts and virtual discussions are recorded. And that's, just so that you can check in, listen to those you might have missed. Just one thing, we don't offer CPE for the recordings, but there's just such great information up there. So I highly recommend that you go up there and check it out. If you have any questions about that, again, happy to talk with you about any of that. And you can also reach out to our National Sponsor Relations Manager, Andrea Hulnay, and even your local marketing people can certainly give you guidance on going into the portal and finding out about all the programs. So that's really it for housekeeping. It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. We have Chris Wetmore, a principal in RSM's technology advisory practice. He has over 20 years of accomplished and diverse IT functional experience. Chris specialized in IT organizational design and strategy, project management, vendor and software selections, business process redesign, as well as the implementation of various enterprise applications. As a principal at RSM, Chris has continued to focus on IT optimization and assessments, IT due diligence, business process reengineering, software selection, and business intelligence. Chris has focused across multiple industries, including construction, real estate, professional services, manufacturing. In addition, Chris leads RSM's National Intelligent Automation practice. His team is responsible for identifying, building, and deploying bots, automations for clients to automate manual processes using the latest RPA technology, which all of that technology is so cool. Joining him is Nick Ezzo, VP of Marketing at Auditoria AI. Nick provides marketing and demand generation leadership to Auditoria to drive qualified opportunities into the sales pipeline and increase customer retention. Prior to Auditoria AI, Nick has held marketing, business development, and technical roles in companies like Sage Intacct, Host Analytics, Equilar, HBO, Aspect, and Nuance Communication. Nick holds a Bachelor of Science in Communications from Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. And I can go on, but I won't because we really want to hear you guys speak today and give us some good information. So Nick, with that, I'm just going to hand it over to you.
All right, sounds great, Angela. Thanks, Angela. Thanks to the CFO Leadership Council, and thanks for the audience for joining us today. We're very pleased that you're with us. I'm very pleased to be joined by Chris. We're gonna have some fun today, and hopefully we'll learn some things. So on with the show. So the topic today that we're gonna cover around technology and why the finance back office should care about advanced technology is really broken down into 4 areas. We're gonna talk about some challenges in the finance back office and based on some survey results that we captured earlier this year. We're going to go into the evolution of finance technology. I'm going to hand it over to Chris, who's going to give us some down-to-earth, real-world pointers about how to get started with automation technology. Then we're going to kind of close with a case study on one of our customers and open the floor to any Q&A. So that sounds like a good time. All right, so for the second year in a row, Auditoria surveyed more than 600 finance professionals to really try to get our arms around what are the challenges that they're dealing with every day in the back office, and to what degree are they struggling with things that are manual, routine, and mundane? So we asked them about tasks that take up most of their time. We asked them about their challenges. We talked about their future, and we asked them about their future and current state of automation in their finance back office. So before I get to our results, I'd like to actually turn it back over to Angela for a brief poll about the overall challenges in finance back office. Angela?
Great, thanks, Nick. And so, audience, we do expect that you're going to answer this quickly. And the question is, what are the overall challenges across the finance back office for you? Is it time spent on repetitive tasks, time spent using tools that no longer work, inaccurate or outdated processes, time spent checking and updating data, or lack of resources to invest in technology? And again, we appreciate so much that you're answering quickly. And I will share that information with all of you in just a couple more seconds as you get the answers to us.
I bet for many of you, it's probably more than one of these. So we'll probably pick the biggest challenges you guys are having. I mean, I've definitely seen clients that, hit multiple ones of these across the board, whether it's in finance back office or really anywhere in the back office. I mean, especially from a CFO perspective, where you're more than likely responsible for HR and IT and legal. You've got a whole, really the whole back office is the whole role of the CFO has sort of evolved over the past 10 years to be a truly strategic role. You've got a lot in the back office, and I bet there's a lot there.
Yes, and you know what, with that, I'm going to share what they have let us know. So 41%, Nick and Chris, say time spent on repetitive tasks. 5% say time spent using tools that no longer work. 18% inaccurate or outdated processes. 26% time spent checking and updating data. And 10% say it's the lack of resources to invest in technology. So back to the both of you.
Any surprises there, Chris?
No, I mean, you'll see in some of the data that I present a little bit later on. I mean, yeah, repetitive tasks are huge. I mean, as technology's involved and we've become so data centric as an organization, that requires us to be very repetitive in terms of entering data, and that leads to exactly that sort of result around the repetitive tasks, and then checking and updating data, which probably a lot of those things go hand in hand in terms of repetitive work. So not a whole lot of surprises for me. I mean, it's definitely what we've seen with a lot of our clients and through a lot of surveys that are out there.
Well, what's amazing to me, I'm just blown away by this, that it almost exactly mirrors the proportions that we found in our survey of 600 finance professionals. In our survey, we found that 29% of people complained that time spent on repetitive tasks was one of their biggest burdens. In addition to that, checking and updating data, that was another big driver. That was 28%. Or the current poll we just did a minute ago was 26%, so within 2 percentage points. And then, let me go back to that for a quick sec. Lack of resource to invest, time spent using tools that are outdated. It's just, very, it's telling, and I'm really kind of glad that the poll that we just saw from this audience reflects what we saw in the overall finance world. Any other thoughts on that, Chris, before we move to the next?
No, like I said, it definitely mirrors sort of what we've seen with clients, and Nick, as you and I have talked before, it's a matter of at what point do these challenges really become pain, and hopefully you start to think about some of these advanced technologies to sort of alleviate some of that pain going forward. Because I mean, I look at these and these all sound very, very painful to me.
Yeah, and there's one thing I've learned over the years is that finance people have a very high capacity they have a very high pain threshold, let's say, meaning that they're willing to put up with a lot of friction in their daily lives. And they put time, effort, throw away nights, weekends, and holidays, just trying to get everything done. And I think you're right. We need to help people understand there's a better way of approaching this, and you don't have to live with that pain. So let's talk about some pain relief. So as we went through this, we asked the question, is your back office sufficiently automated? And almost 60% said no. When we asked how many of your team's tasks are automated, 78%, less than half of their team's tasks were automated. And then 37% said they don't even use advanced technology at all. And while this was not a surprise, given how these tasks are typically executed, a third said that AP was the most manual, and almost a fourth said that AR was the most manual. So, this is really kind of putting a fine point on really where that pain is existing in the back office. Is this also what you're seeing, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you still see sort of a slow adoption of digital technologies within the finance function, and where there's a lot of solutions out there to sort of help with some of these things. There's still a lot of manual work and a lot of opportunity to really alleviate what's coming down on the individual employees within the back office, to help alleviate that and give them a better life. This is dead on from what I'm seeing.
Well, great. Well, so I think it's time for our second polling question. So I'm going to hand it back to Angela to ask the audience about which of the following activities takes up most of your team's time.
Yes, and audience, if you would answer again, is it gathering data for analysis, analyzing data for insights reports, communicating with internal and external stakeholders, audit and compliance related activities, or trying to learn and improve business processes? And as they're answering, Nick and Chris, I'll make you laugh, because in the other poll, one of our audience members said that we certainly should have had the choice of all of the above. So yeah, exactly. And you talk about the pain threshold. What about that, right?
Yeah. I find this polling question to be pretty interesting too, because I bet, at least for the calendar year end people out there, I bet, if we'd been asking this in sort of like right around April, May, I bet audit and compliance would be the #1. So it's, timing of the year, I think also, comes into play a little bit around this question. The day-to-day, transaction processing that happens in finance versus the compliance and the audit stuff that happens, at the beginning of every year for most organizations that are out there. So I'm interested to see, the results on this.
Yes, and I'm going to share them with you right now. So this audience says 47% say gathering data for analysis, 23% analyzing data for insights reports, 7% communicating with internal and external stakeholders, 9% audit and compliance related activities, and 14% trying to learn and improve business processes. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I mean the first item there is sort of low value activity compared to the second item, which is high value activity, right? I mean, gathering data, it does not theoretically bring, but it's a necessary evil to get to the higher value activity. And number two is really the analysis and the insights, and being able to really provide decision making KPIs and data points for the organization. So never good when a lot, all your time is going towards just the pulling the data versus the second part, which is the higher value activity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's why I used to tell my marketing teams, if you're doing something and you feel like a robot while you're doing it, chances are a robot should be doing that task. And so data collection for analysis is definitely something that can be automated and can be done by non-human bots, and let the humans do what they're good at, which is analysis. So I'm going to switch to the same question that we asked on our survey, and I'm going to also contrast what that poll looked like in 2020 at the very beginning of the pandemic and what it looked like in 2021, kind of midway through the pandemic. So I think in some ways, 2020, 2021, and even 2022 will be kind of known as the year of the asterisk. I mean, we can't escape the impact that coronavirus and the global pandemic had on our daily lives and our workplaces. And then everything we look at over these last 2 years, the data we gathered, the asterisk says this year was exceptional, different than any other year that we've ever seen. And so all the data is going to be skewed. But that said, we're seeing some consistency here. So gathering data, while that was 47% in the snap poll that we just did, it was a pretty significant driver in both 2020 and 2022. In fact, it became the second biggest thing after audit and preparedness and compliance related activities from 2020 to 2022. So gathering data, still a big issue, still a big driver, friction point. audit, and so we'll highlight that one. Analyzing data, pulling, trying to learn and improve companies' businesses and their business processes. And there's that big one right there, which was a kind of a surprise for me. It jumped from 14 to 24% in the beginning of the pandemic to 2021 in the middle of the pandemic. People started to really care about audit and compliance related activities. So thoughts about that, Chris?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I wonder, where sort of the talent comes into play, right? I mean, we've seen a lot of changing of people, right? People sort of cycling through different jobs, working for different organizations, changing their career paths, and I wonder if that sort of talent war has sort of had an effect, right? Where you might have had more time and more people to do analyzing data, for the insights and reports in 2020, but then as we work through 2020 through the pandemic, you see people leaving the profession, leaving the industry, moving into different things, having sort of those self-realization moments and leaving sort of that shortage of talent within the finance department, which means that, hey, we still need to sort of do some of these other things, and maybe we can't focus in on some of that stuff now that we're in 2021.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So let's go to our final question, where we, I guess the news from the survey isn't all bad. 38% said investing in new technology is a priority for next year. Implementing new technology, streamlining your processes, allowing your team to focus on higher level business tasks, as you mentioned earlier, Chris. And so, we know that the future of the workplace is digital. The executives in this survey, finance people across all stripes, they're looking for ways to become more efficient and be able to predict how work gets done within their domain, being able to predict cash and other key indicators, key performance indicators within their business is going to be super important. So people do want to reduce these manual repetitive tasks, and they want to invest. More than a third are thinking about investing. So I think that brings us to our third poll of this audience. Let's hand it back over to Angela to talk about the top priority for your department.
Yes, and that is the question. So is it to undergo a digital transformation, audience, rebuild team and culture, build diversity, equity, and inclusion, increase growth and expansion, or manage costs and find savings? This will be an interesting one as well.
Yeah, I always find it interesting, the whole term digital transformation is, the term digital, although it's been around since, really the 80s, marketing, all the big software firms really sort of took to it in the past, couple years and really sort of pushing out digital transformation. And what is digital? Is it e-commerce? Is it, really more on the customer journey side of things? Is it the digital back office, the digital office of the CFO? And what does that mean? It's such an elusive term, when you start thinking about, digital transformation. What does that mean? And every organization is different. I mean, some organizations I work with, it's even just moving from a legacy ERP to, a more modern cloud-based, web-based ERP. They consider that digital transformation. So it's such an interesting term to me when thinking about it. And each organization has to sort of define it for themselves.
Yeah, and I think the finance department is one of the final frontiers for digital transformation. It's already happened in my discipline of marketing. Sales automation or CRM has been around for more than 2 decades. Engineering, process testing, QA, and even customer service has been automated using chatbots. Finance is kind of that last vestige that really hasn't embraced automation to the degree that it can and should. So I think we're going to see that in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and maybe that goes back to the whole idea of the tolerance of pain, right? I have the results here. It says our audience says 48% say undergoing a digital transformation is their top priority for their department. 8% say rebuild team and culture. No one said build diversity, equity, and inclusion. 28% said increase growth and expansion, and 18% said manage costs and find savings.
Not a lot of surprises there. I think I'm actually pleasantly surprised that people are embracing digital transformation and really trying to rethink the nature of work in the finance back office.
Yeah, no, I agreed. I mean, and especially if you can start to, really sort of combine also multiple areas within the back office, right? So it becomes a truly strategic program where you are, digitally transforming your HR department, your legal department, your document management, depending on the type of organization, various areas of operations as well. When you can truly bring together a full digital program, it becomes incredibly powerful for an organization. So it's great to see that continue to be a major trend. And like I said, as much as the term itself continues to be an elusive one, I think people generally understand that they need to add technology to be more efficient. And I maybe at a very, very base core, that is sort of how you define it.
Yeah, excellent point. So we've spent about 20 minutes kind of digging into the pain in the back office, uncovering some of the inefficiencies, both from our survey that we did earlier in the year, as well as like getting some real-time snap data from this audience about some of those pain points. And I think we've got a pretty good handle on where those pain points are. It's around routine mundane processes, it's around AP, it's around AR, pretty much the whole back office. So let's switch gears and talk about how some of the technology has evolved in the last couple of years and what we're looking at for the next 5 to 10 years, what's on the horizon. So I'll present a couple of slides and I'll hand it over to you, Chris. So since the dawn of time, finance people have done things manually. Okay, so it's just a thing. We all know that. The finance people are the unsung heroes in any organization. They're kind of like the IT department. The only time you really notice a finance or accounting person is when they've dramatically screwed up, and that's the only time that attention is drawn to them. Otherwise, finance folks, they are the unsung heroes toiling in the background to make sure that the books get closed, that the employees get paid, that their tax forms are filed, that vendors are getting paid, that customer bills are being paid, and the cash is being collected and managed and measured and reported on. So a lot of manual work in the back office. We've already talked about that. That's a lot of pain. About 10 or 12 years ago, there was something that was introduced called robotic process automation, or RPA. And Chris knows Chris has probably forgotten more about RPA than I'll ever know. So that's his area of his domain of expertise. So and I'm not here to cast aspersions on RPA. I think it's a great technology, and it really took people from the manual world to the next level. Along with that, there was business process automation. And these were kind of early approaches in which companies would use a tool set to mimic a human being sitting at a computer with a keyboard and a mouse. They would have a screen and a keyboard and a mouse, some input devices, and the computer application would then do what's called screen scraping and keystroke logging to mimic a human being keying data in, or interpreting structured data out of a document like a PDF or an Excel sheet. Since then, those were great. Since then, there's a new category of applications, and for lack of a better term, you might call these cognitive RPA applications or AI cognitive systems. And these don't necessarily try to mimic what a human being can do, but they plug directly into today's modern cloud ERP infrastructure, and they provide a lot of applications that do the basic stuff that people either aren't good at or they don't want to do. So the bots, for lack of a better word, can look at both structured and unstructured data. The bots can scan an invoice out of an email and create a journal entry. The bots can scan historical data and make estimates on journal entries, and even prepare those journal entries for a human operator to input or post into the general ledger. Bots can do things like predictive cash flow forecasting or predictive remittance forecasting. Which of your customers are likely to be late in making payments? Which ones are trending in the right direction? Which ones are trending in the wrong direction? So the bots can do a lot of very simple, routine, mundane tasks, but bots can also do some very complicated and sort of analytical and cognitive tasks. The last thing I'll say about that is where human beings are very good at seeing patterns after they've already occurred, bots and algorithms are very good at spotting patterns while they're occurring. Example, if you have a customer and that customer regularly pays 10 days early, every month they're paying 10 days early, and then for 2 or 3 months in a row, they're still paying early, but they're only paying 5 days early. A human being would almost never notice that because the organization is not late in their payments, they're not in arrears. But a bot and an algorithm is smart enough to say, oh, that 10-day early payer is now a 5-day early payer. Our days sales outstanding, our DSO, is trending in the wrong direction. I should alert a human operator so they can go and try to figure out what's going on here. So those are the types of applications that we're looking at and exploring as we move into this next realm of digital transformation. So, we're seeing these trends around technology. It's been around for a few years. RPA, robots and cobots, that stands for collaborative bots. That was a new one I learned recently. Computer vision used to be called optical character recognition. It's just the ability for an algorithm to read data out of a document and understand what that means. NLP is natural language processing and speech technology. So, these technologies are in these new generation of systems for the following reasons. We want to make better decisions. We want to improve the quality of the internal and external customer interactions. We want to achieve significant savings in both time and money. We want to build those digital capabilities required to improve those internal processes and take advantage of new technologies to really reduce cost, optimize performances, and gain a competitive advantage. Or another way of putting that is, don't get left behind. Not to be a harbinger of doom here, but companies, if you have a set of companies that are where all things are equal, similar size, similar transactional velocity, similar processes, the organization that is more efficient will almost always win. And so if you don't embrace technology to become more efficient, you are literally ceding ground to your competitors. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris, who's going to walk us through how to really get started with automation and technology. So I'll drive the slides, Chris. Just let me know if you want to, when you want to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. No, appreciate it, Nick. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. I mean, I think you talked about some really interesting concepts, right, in terms of sort of the evolution of technology within the finance department, going from sort of the traditional, very manual, to the the induction of RPA that still is a very relevant technology, into sort of what I would call sort of sort of dumb bots, if you will, into what I now call sort of smart bots, where now we're adding some of the AI components or the artificial intelligence components that are out there into some of these bots. The thing that we're obviously seeing is that sort of a prerequisite to that is the introduction or the implementation of a modern ERP with those APIs and whatnot. Sort of available, right, where RPA sort of still plays a lot with sort of legacy ERPs that don't have those sort of more modern architectures, if you will. I think that what we're seeing here at Cross Automation, especially over the past year or so, is that the demand for automation is absolutely skyrocketing out there. It is a unique sort of skill set and thought process to really think around it. But as we sort of think through it, I mean, what we're seeing is, especially in the mid-market where a lot of my clients are, some of that talent is still hard to build, to grow, to find. So, this next wave of technology is making it easier, so that you don't need an RPA developer, or at least someone with an RPA type mindset, to be able to build some of this stuff. It's all about sort of more increasing and delivering more pre-built automations using some of this cognitive AI that's driving, a ton of growth and a ton of savings, within the general automation market, whether it's more on the platform side or more on what I would call sort of pre-built point solution side. That is out there, and I'll talk a little bit about those in a couple slides. But it's absolutely growing, and the reasons are real. There's a lot of pain out there. There's definitely a lot of sort of scaling up with organizations that are looking at how to do it without sort of investing so much in the human capital side. Then there's just, like I said, the movement of human capital as well, from people leaving, and the natural attrition that sort of happens, and that's sort of happening, right? We got to remember that one of the largest sectors of employees, and one of the largest generations of employees are retiring out, right? The whole baby boomer generation is aging out. They're starting to retire, going into their golden ages, and now we need to replace that entire workforce. And automation is sort of that little nugget that's going to help us do that, and really enable the next generations who don't want to do that sort of repetitive transactional work, and get them into the higher value activity. So next slide, Nick. So, but you're definitely seeing more and more growth, although it's still very, very new. I would say that's out there. But the pandemic has sort of introduced, a little bit of a spark into it. If you read out there, that there's these concepts of black swans and white swans and gray swans. Black swans are sort of unknown, unpredictable. You never knew that they were going to happen. White swans are sort of like, hey, it's going to happen. You can plan for it, et cetera, et cetera. Gray swans are sort of like, hey, it might happen. It's going to happen sooner or later. You can plan for it, but you have to choose to take the risk, right? And that's basically what this whole pandemic was. Everybody has been predicted. We've got a lot of warning signs over a number of years that this could happen, all right? And we've seen them sort of come, and I think we got into sort of a false sense of security around, hey, these pandemics happen, they usually never turn out well. Eventually we're bound for it, and it's gonna happen again in the future. And when they do happen, we see massive changes in the way we work, right? We see those supply chains sort of changing, and we've really seen sort of a focus around risk and resilience, and being able to be a more resilient organization, so that when these type of events are happening, we're able to adjust. And obviously there's a human impact to that, there's a technology impact, all right? And, lastly, we saw software pricing start to come down, right? Heavy competition as, all these software companies, more and more technology comes out every year, and it's creating all this competition, and that's driving pricing down, as well as, getting away from, the Fortune 500 and driving the pricing down to make it more consumable for, basically all the mid and upper market and all the way down to the SMB, and provide those capabilities. And you can see on the bottom left, so sort of some of the trends in terms of what people were thinking about over the past year, in terms of their automation investments. And we've talked a lot about some of the core benefits, around what this automation is. And to my earlier point, it's not just those massive large employees. It's medium, it's small employees, that are investing in some of this technology. So it is really become sort of a global, imperative, especially at the board level, but for companies to evaluate automation and look at the options that are out there and come up with some sort of strategic plan, because, it is going to help you, decrease your risk and increase your resiliency, as an organization to withstand, whether it's a pandemic or, an economic downturn or an economic upturn, right? Being able to add that, organizational agility, as I call it, has been a huge focus over the past year within a lot of my clients and throughout many industries, because the pandemic sort of exposed the lack of resiliency and agility within our organizations. So go ahead, next slide, Nick. So where are people automating? This is from a software company called Avi that does some of that advanced OCR, basically computer vision type experience, and they did a similar survey. And they're finding, customer experience and back office administration, right? And that's sort of, in finance planning and decision making. So 2 out of the 3 top areas that people are looking at RPA, which is, really sort of the base of around a lot of the automation, is where people are really sort of focusing in on it. Now, the problem with RPA, and we'll get to this and why sort of this next wave of tools is that what you see with RPA that's out there is that a lot of organizations don't truly understand their processes. They don't have a really good understanding of how a process actually works in order to automate it. So, hey, I've got this manual repetitive task. I'm going to go in. I'm going to automate it. You build your automation. You build the process flows, the design documents. Someone goes out and builds it, and then they come back, and it turns out that there's all these little nuances that you weren't able to pick up along the way, for any number of reasons. And then those automation projects start to sort of fall down a little bit. You're not getting the true benefit that's out there. And RPA as a technology itself, although it's really cool and does really interesting stuff, it is also a fragile technology. It depends on basically a very stable environment around technology. So because it's working through the front end many times through the user interface, although the newer the updated ones are now working more through the APIs. It requires that user interface to be very, very stable. So if it's constantly changing, or you're trying to automate something that works with a third party, like a bank, for example, and you're logging in and pulling down bank statements, well, if that bank updates their website and changes a bunch of things, the bot doesn't know that the way a human does. They can't adjust to that. So you have to factor that in, because they are sort of a fragile technology, which gets back to this advent of sort of smarter bots that have sort of come to market, pre-built bots that are helping automate some of the tasks, not all of the tasks, because you still have to sort of find things that are repetitive and useful across multiple industries, like collections, for example. So Nick, next slide.
I think we're time for another poll question. Angela, you want to throw up the what's the highest level automation technology you've implemented?
Absolutely, doing that right now. So audience, this is your last polling question. What is the highest level of automation technology you've implemented? Is it whatever comes with my ERP, basic OCR and or robotic process automation, machine learning and artificial intelligence, next gen AI and cognitive systems, NLP, computer vision, etc., or no technology in place? But we'll give them a couple of more seconds to answer and see what they come up with. And see if we can surprise the two of you.
Yeah, this should be very interesting because this was not part of our survey, so I don't really have any data around this from our efforts. So I'd be very interested to hear what the the few dozen folks who are on the call today, what they're seeing.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Yeah, and I always chuckle a little bit whenever I see artificial intelligence because there's when you think about artificial intelligence, there's no sort of singular true AI essence that's out there, right? There's not like a Terminator type person who can really do and mimic everything that a human does. There's sort of different segments of AI that are out there, whether it's natural language processing that's really sort of understanding and gathering insights into whether it's an email or a speech. There's computer vision that sort of is able to use machine learning to be able to see things, and and all those self-driving cars really think about use computer vision to identify different things on the road and be able to sort of do things. And then there's the machine learning things, which is really advanced statistics to be able to make predictions on how to handle a certain decision based off of years and years of complex data to be able to do it, along with some of the basic process automation and process intelligence work. So let's see how we did.
Yeah, so I'm going to share that with you right now. So it looks like 60% said whatever comes with my ERP, 26% said basic OCR and or RPA, robotic process automation, 9% machine learning and artificial intelligence, 0% said next gen AI and cognitive systems, and 6% said no technology in place. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I'm actually not surprised, but I guess the takeaway is people, they're in a good starting place. If you're getting 60%, if 60% of the people said, hey, I got an ERP and the ERP is providing basic functionality and basic automation, that's a really great place to start because now you've exhausted that avenue. Now you can start to layer on other more advanced technologies that plug directly into your cloud ERP system to supercharge your ERP or general ledger or accounting software, if you will. So that's actually really exciting for me. That bodes well that there's a lot of fertile ground out there, a lot of companies that have a good foundation that they can implement next level technology. Chris?
Yeah, no, I mean, it didn't really surprise me. I would say that most companies still sort of are sitting at that ERP level, right? Hey, I got some sort of, business process support, sort of approval processing, some basic automation that's going to come with an ERP, right? And that's usually why if you think about it, way back before, the quote unquote modern ERP came around, right? It was, all paper ledgers, right? Right. And, you automated that and digitized that to get into the ERP. Right now, this next wave is really, the automation, and then they started to add more automation into the ERP platform themselves. But the next wave is the true sort of advanced technologies that are coming and integrating with those modern ERPs, right? And you think, oh well, why aren't these ERPs doing it themselves? Well, I'll tell you that talking to some of our partners and a lot of the ERP vendors that are out there, there's so much just keeping up with sort of the accounting regulations that are out there. They're trying to add bits and pieces. A lot of them do use some natural language processing and some predictive aspects of it. But when you think about the world of work that's out there, they just can't handle all that information. And to be honest with you, it can be pretty intensive from a workload perspective and a development perspective to sort of enter into that, which is where a lot of these automation solutions sort of come into play and have a nice sort of niche industry to work with.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Chris, you guys have either partnered or worked with the IMA, the Institute of Managerial Accountants, to kind of survey, a year ago about, transforming the finance function. You want to share with some of the results that came out of that survey?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at it. So so you can definitely see that transforming the finance function, when asked about areas that finance professionals saw the most opportunity, it was really around RPA and artificial intelligence, and really you see those two technologies start to merge, more and more. We talked a little bit about smart bots or intelligent bots. You see that over 50% are starting to see or really believe that that's going to have the greatest impact on the finance function over the next 3 years. And it goes back to all the reasons that we've talked about already. And then you see from McKinsey where people are thinking about automation within finance, right? The general accounting operations that are out there, right? AR, AP, record to report, journal entries, collections, invoice processing, right? These are the general accounting operations. And the data that they found is that it's highly automatable, or fully automatable in many cases, through the research that they did. And then you see some things around cash disbursement and revenue management. So a lot of opportunity in sort of the base finance and accounting role that you're able to leverage some of the automation on. So the opportunity is real, it's out there, and you're definitely seeing people take advantage of it, especially for scaling organizations or organizations that have seen sort of a lot of change over the past couple of years. And it's just a matter of sort of making the investment, which is always a little bit of a challenge unto itself, is sort of making the investment into these technologies. But the ROI is real, and obviously the company's going to see a good benefit out of this technology, once it's implemented and implemented correctly and up and stable. Go ahead, Nick.
Cool. Let's talk about some mid-market technologies.
Yeah, and this is one of my favorite slides, because it starts to talk about who plays in this place, and I'll talk a little bit about Nick and Auditoria as well, and it's sort of split left and right on your screen in terms of platform technologies and point solutions, in terms of what's out there and what people are using. In the RPA world, you're really seeing Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and now Microsoft really sort of come into play. Microsoft sort of entered in it. They made an acquisition about a year ago, and really sort of integrated that into their Power Platform, their automation suite, if you will. So they've got a decent start in terms of RPA. Automation Anywhere and UiPath are sort of the clear leaders in this. And there's some slight differences between the two. Automation Anywhere is a little bit more business friendly. UiPath's a little bit more, technical. So you see IT departments tend to adopt that a little bit more. It's slightly more developer-ish, and Automation Anywhere completely cloud-based. Then you start, we haven't really talked a lot about data blending, but one thing, and we saw some of the results in the survey, being able to do data analytics and really work with data, the tools like Alteryx and RapidMiner that can take large data sets from multiple data solutions and sort of blend them all together in order to garner insights in a much faster manner, is becoming a huge trend out there around automation. So really sort of focused around sort of that repeatable workflow of data that people are doing, and that's definitely relevant within the finance organization as they're trying to analyze data, find opportunities, to grow revenue, to grow margin. These tools become very very cool tools to sort of work with. And then lastly, in the bottom left is really some of this, advanced OCR technology that's out there, or computer vision technology. And the way this technology works is that, traditional OCR, if you get a particular form, a very, very standard form, so you think about, like a tax form, for example, everything has to be in a specific spot. And an OCR, you basically program it to say, okay, look here for this piece of data, look here for this piece of data, right? And that's how it reads it. But it has to be extremely structured and very, very consistent. What these newer technologies are, really allows you to use computer vision and machine learning, so that as you process an invoice, for example, it is able to learn and apply that learning to the next invoice structure that comes in. So if you have one vendor that uses one invoice structure and then another vendor that uses a different invoice structure, you basically teach the software, teach the bot how to read them, and it becomes smarter and smarter, and it starts to predict and be able to read those, semi-structured documents and say, hey, I think this is my invoice number. Can you confirm that? And you're able to confirm it, and then it takes that learning and applies it to the next invoice. So the more you process, the smarter it gets, and the more sort of what we call straight through processing happens. Now that's invoices, but really any sort of semi-structured document like an invoice, like a PO, can use this technology in order to read and process some of these documents, right? And there was another study out there that talked about how many document-centric processes exist out there, and it is a lot more than I even thought about. It was 60-70% use some form of document in their process, and that's where these two tools have become very, very successful. Now, on the right-hand side, you've got sort of the traditional sort of off-the-shelf plug-and-play point solutions, right? You've got your procure-to-pay solutions like a Coupa or an AvidXchange or a Bill.com on the smaller side that helps really on that AP automation side and a little bit on the procurement automation side. Then you've got your expense automation, which is sort of table stakes these days in terms of scanning receipts, processing receipts, processing them, coding them, and helping them getting into your ERP. And then your close automation suites, Blackline and Flowcast, that's going to do your account reconciliations and help really drive that financial close process, right? And these are all very, very point solutions, right? And some of them use some base forms of AI, some computer vision, but there's a contrast between the two. RPA, data blending, these are all sort of platforms that you have to build from scratch, right? You're sitting there with a blank screen, you have to sort of build it from scratch and sort of build the automation. On the right-hand side, it's, hey, I'm going to, these I'm going to install, they're going to integrate, right? And it's, sort of is a business process tool. And what's sort of happening is in the middle here is where you see tools like an Auditoria, where it uses concepts from RPA and some of the OCR, advanced OCR computer vision tools, and the concepts from the right-hand side from a point solutions, because it's pre-built and able to do a lot of the same things, but you don't have to start from a blank slate. It's already sort of pre-configured using best practices. And that's sort of what's coming to market right now, especially in finance, where from organization to organization, you see a lot of repetitive, consistent processes, right? There's only so many ways you're going to process AP, all right? And because it's so consistent from company to company, it's created a nice market for tools like an Auditoria that can actually create these sort of AI-driven automations that can really handle a gambit of opportunities. Now, your organizations that have a very unique process, for example, you sort of have to go to the left-hand side here and you have to say, well, we've got a very, because of our business, because of what we're doing, we need something that's very, very unique to us. And that's where the tools over on the left-hand side, those platforms really sort of come into play. And then if you're say, hey, we're not very unique, some minor configuration changes, you land more towards the right or in a tool set like an Auditoria, for example. So this is really the where the world's at. We're seeing tons of clients first implement an ERP, upgrade an ERP, right? And then they're sort of deciding, okay, am I going to focus more on sort of point solutions that are going to fit my environment, or I have a very, very unique process requirements that lead me down more of a platform solution. So sort of going back and forth and defining what their automation strategy is based off of that.
All right, cool, awesome. This is actually a great slide, and if anybody hasn't taken a screenshot of this, they probably should now. We will send you the deck afterward, but this is one where I love this, and so thanks for that, Chris. In the next 10 minutes or so, I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A at the end. I'm going to go through these next few slides pretty rapid fire and try to spend only a minute on each one. So, and I want to try to impart the audience with some practical next steps because this has been pretty conceptual so far. So let's bring it down into some things that are very concrete. So first, to cloud or not to cloud. When I joined Host Analytics back in 2014, the wars of cloud versus on-prem were still going on. I'm happy to report that today in 2021, they're over. The risky choice is not the cloud, rather it's to try to operate your own data center when you really don't have a security background and trying to keep the bad guys out. So most modern companies, most kind of best-in-class companies have already moved their infrastructure into the cloud. Chris underscored that earlier when he talked about the gray swan of the pandemic. If you weren't already thinking about remote work before 2020, you should now. Secondly, traditional versus innovative. If there's a cloud-based financial management system that embraces innovative technology that's easy to leverage quickly, lift and shift versus transformation, that means, in my mind, do you want to just kind of dust off or polish up an old process, or do you want to rethink whether you need that process in the first place, or maybe there are too many steps to the process? So lift and shift is what I refer to as just automating somebody's tasks as a human being would do them. Transformation is asking the question, should they even be doing those tasks at all, and is there a better way? Develop upskilling strategies. This is something that most people don't think about, but you will be taking parts of people's jobs and giving them to machines. Now, on one level, that's great, because now that frees them up to be able to provide more brain power to the organization, to help drive strategy, to help provide analytics and insights. But that stuff doesn't come automatically. And so if somebody is used to doing routine, mundane work without having to use their brain, and now you're suddenly asking them to be an analyst and provide insights, we're going to have to help them, some folks, to gain those skills. And then finally, capitalize the opportunity. If you can automate things like DSO, and you can access free cash flow from your customer base into your own corporate coffers, what could you do with that? Would you open up a new market? Would you develop a new product line? Would you pay a dividend to your investors? If you're a startup, would you potentially defer your next round of funding? So all kinds of interesting things there. So I'll run through this pretty quick. This is basic change management stuff. Always think about what the outcome is that you're trying to what you're trying to achieve. Not the steps necessarily, but where do you want to end up? What's the end state? Have a change management plan ready, and make sure that all the people in your company and outside of the company who are stakeholders have a say in it, or at least are aware of it. Because the quickest way to torpedo a change management project is to not involve people. And when they find out that it's happening, their default setting is sometimes to resist. Test, and then involve your subject matter experts or SMEs throughout the entire process as you go through this. Rely on the professionals, like, for example, Chris at RSM with previous experience to help you through this process. So let's just conclude with one quick case study. So there's a company that's our customer, an Auditoria customer. They're called User Testing. They refer to themselves as the Human Insight Platform. They're based out of San Francisco. They've got about 3,000 customers. Earlier this year, we had them implement, they asked us to implement our AI bots for their collections and dunning. We wired it up within 20 minutes or so. We tested it and kind of configured it in the next couple of weeks, and we rolled it out, in fact, more than 4 weeks ahead of schedule. And then it is now handling all of the customer communications for accounts receivable for user testing. So our bots are literally sending out emails with notices before they're due, inquiring about payments when they're past due, providing opportunities for payments, escalating to a human operator when there's a dispute or a short pay. And the net result of this is that in just a couple of months, they had a double-digit reduction in their AR balances and improvement in their DSO. When I spoke with Jen, my friend who is their director of revenue accounting over there, she said that their accounts receivable has never been better, their cash performance has never been healthier, and their DSO has never been lower. So this is a real-world example of how a company who's a software company has used bots to streamline and automate parts of the finance function. So before we open up to Q&A in the last couple minutes, what we heard today was that still in 2021, the back office is still largely manual. Technology has evolved in new directions. Mimicking what a human being does was great for a while, but it's not good enough anymore. We need to take automation to the next level, and I hope that through Chris's presentation and my commentary, that you understand things like computer vision and unstructured data and how to use machine learning to really take your automation to the next level. Automation is definitely the key for unlocking potential for growth, and if you're already a high growth company, it's imperative that you automate. It's inevitable. You're going to, because we talk to companies every day. You can't hire your way out of inefficiency in the back office. And then last but not least, get started with practical next steps. Good vendor evaluation and a thorough change management plan. This is just classic stuff. I will now turn the floor back over to Angela, who take us home for the next 7 or so minutes with some open Q&A.
Great, thank you so much. And this was great, and thanks for bulleting those key takeaways. I think it's so important, and I think even the reminder for change management, I think it's really important to just keep that in mind at all times. So we do have one question that came through, and of course, audience, please keep putting them in there. But this one says, my organization is small, 6-person back office shop. When I looked at various technology 18 months ago, Alteryx, UiPath, the price point was too high. So his question really is, are you seeing evolutions in the pricing for smaller organizations?
Yeah, I can take that first. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you look at UiPath, I mean, it continues to be a fairly expensive tool unto itself to get started. I mean, you're looking at, definitely tens of thousands of dollars, to sort of get going with a UiPath, for example. Um, my first suggestion is what do you want to automate, and see if there's a point solution first, especially in the smaller arena. You want to start with the point solutions depending on what you want to automate. From there, what you're definitely seeing is sort of a price competition where, you can get, a bot, in sort of a singular buy in an environment where, for under $10,000 a year, from a pure RPA perspective, if you've got one of those unique processes. And you can get that, and a bot in, mostly RPA terms, allows you basically 24 hours of processing per day. So it can do 8 hours of one process, 8 hours of another process, and 8 hours of a third process, or 2 hours, 2 hours times 12 processes, whatever it may be. It gets you sort of that 24 hours of capacity to run different automations. Then you just have to build it. So you can get it down under $10,000 a year from a licensing perspective with some of the tools. And even less. I mean, Microsoft's getting very, very aggressive with their tool set now. Their tool set's not quite as advanced, I would say, as some of the leaders that are out there. But if you got a fairly simple process, there is sometimes an opportunity to get in at a lower cost point. But like I said, depending on the process, especially in smaller organizations, the best advice is always, okay, well, I want to automate this. Well, let me go out and see if there is a pre-built solution that's out there versus going down that RPA solution or an Alteryx solution. Let me see what it's out there first. And then, if there's nothing there, then you have to sort of figure out, okay, what is it worth to you and what's the ROI, and then decide, okay, is what's the cost profile look like, in terms of doing it.
Yeah, I love that question. In fact, I couldn't have asked for a better question, because to the question asker, you literally put a point on why Auditoria exists. Because part of what we want to do, our mission is to help democratize technology. So it's not just for the largest companies, that mid-market companies, let's say companies from 20 or 50 million annual revenue all the way up to 500 million, maybe $1 billion, mid-market, upper mid-market, they have access to this technology. So if you have a cloud ERP system, an Oracle NetSuite, a Sage Intacct, an Oracle ERP Cloud, a Workday Financials, if you've got a modern cloud infrastructure that we can plug into, companies like Auditoria and the category that we play in, companies like us can solve problems with vendor management, vendor onboarding, vendor tax form updating. I showed you the collections example from user testing. All of those things that really take up that time and the friction in the back office. There's category of companies like Auditoria that exist in order to solve those problems for the mid-market. So thanks for that question.
That's great. Thank you for such a great answer as well. So I'll end with this because we only have a couple of minutes. And so there's always roadblocks, right? There's always reasons as to why companies are not investing in technology, and there's all of that. If you were to leave the audience with just that one bit of advice about perhaps the one roadblock that really they should consider and then not consider, what would it be? What would be the one roadblock that you would just say, you know what, get that one out of your way because you really want to go forward?
Chris, you want to take a shot at that one first?
Let's see, the one roadblock to get out of the way for an organization. I think that the hesitation, right? I mean, most people don't like software implementations. They just don't. So there is a change management. There's an excitement. There's an understanding that the longer you go without implementing these technology, the more technical debt you're building up within the organization. So, the idea that these are, always going to be tough, hard implementations are not necessarily, the fact that, hey, finance is a back office, is cost center, that's not, so I don't have to worry about it. I think that's a farce as well. So it's all about, basically, get out of the way, get out of your own way of sort of like, hey, this is not a priority. You have to make it a priority. So I'd say that's probably my one roadblock. Like, get out of the mindset that it's not a priority and make it a priority.
That's a great answer, Chris. I would underscore that a little bit and say, make sure your data is in order before you, try to automate anything. And it's one of the things people don't think about. Data is not like, the first thing. It's not sexy, but it is foundational. And making sure that you have clean data, well-organized data will help you, because whatever you automate, you're gonna see great results, but you won't have great results if you don't have good input data. So I would say spend a little time cleaning the house before you renovate. That'd be my guidance. Back to you, Angela.
Love the analogy. That was great. And I'll just add this because, again, unless there's another question, I'll just say this. We've been talking to CFOs across the country, and with all that's going on right now with the workforce, I've been hearing from so many that, trying to hire and get the best, really, it's the technology that are required. And you both mentioned, people coming into the workforce, they do not want to do the mundane. They don't even have the patience to do the mundane.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to really recruit and retain that great talent, I think it's absolutely necessary at this time in our history. So, and evolution, right?
Yeah.
Great.
For sure.
I want to thank you both, Chris and Nick. Thank you so much for coming today, sharing your knowledge. I know there were several people that asked if they can actually have the deck, so they'll definitely be looking into that. So thank you I heard you, Nick, say that it would be okay to share it. So thank you for sharing. Audience, I would just say if there are any questions after you get off of the webcast today, I'm sure that Chris and Nick would both be happy to take your questions. So definitely reach out. You can always contact me in order to connect you, however that works. But with that, we are at the top of the hour, and I will say thank you again. And this does conclude the presentation on why the finance back office should care about advanced technology. Stay safe and stay connected, all.